basis for morality. Before I pass the word to Roberto, he is currently the president of the Spirit Federation of São Paulo, director of courses on continuing Spiritism education, and director of courses on the Spiritist philosophy. Roberto has a bachelor's degree in philosophy and business. He also has an MBA from PUC in São Paulo, Brazil. And he's going to be talking, as we said, about good and evil, the basis for morality. As usual, we'll go ahead and give ourselves about 45 to an hour for Roberto to share the message with us. And then we'll open up for questions, comments that you may have that is pertinent, obviously, to this talk. Roberto, I'll pass the word to you, and then you will control from here on, okay? Until we come back, just let me know, and I'll come back and we'll start sharing the questions and comments. Thank you. Thanks for your time.
Okay, thank you, Leo. Good evening. I'm very glad to be with you all this evening, and we are going to talk today about this issue that is on the Book of Genesis from Kardec, and also the Spiritist book. So we are going to start by a passage from the Book of Genesis from Moses in this case, right? So we have this passage about the paradise lost. And there Moses was supposed to write. Then the Lord took the man and placed him in the paradise of the lights for him to cultivate and to take care of it. He also gave him this order: you may eat from all the trees of paradise, but do not eat the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. For as soon as you eat from it, you shall most certainly die. So, what is an interpretation of Kardec? He says that the tree of the knowledge of good and evil symbolizes the consciousness, our consciousness, right, of good and evil. So it's actually the moral consciousness. And the human acquired it in order to develop we acquired it, right, in order to develop our intelligence and free will by choosing between the two, choosing between good and evil. And then it signals the point at which the human takes possession of its freedom and incurs responsibility for its acts. So this passage is very important because it means it shows the moment when our moral consciousness arise, and then we have our free will, and by choosing between good and evil and having responsibilities of our choices, we become a moral person, right? So, and then the evolution of ourselves intellectually and morally, and all the process, we go through reincarnation to achieve the state, let's say, of a pure spirit. So that's what we are going to talk about today. And good and evil is the basis for morality, right? So, but what is morality? And then we see that on the Spiritist book. Then Kardec says, well, actually it's not Kardec, right? They are the Spiritists who answer Kardec's questions. And there, the Spiritist says that morality is the rule of the good conduct. In other words, it is the ability to distinguish between good and evil. So it's directly connected to the free will, right? And it's founded on the observance of God's law. Humans behave correctly when they do everything for the good of all. So what we can see here is that although by our free will, we have the freedom to choose between good and evil, at the end of the day, when we are elevate the air spirits, we certainly will choose only good, right? Because God's law is directly connected to good. And that's why the Spirit says that good is everything that is in harmony with God's law, whereas evil is the contrary, right? Is everything that deviates from it, from God's law. And then we have that golden rule, right? Taught by Jesus. Um, do unto others what you would want them do unto you. So that is the basic rule, right? To choose only the good, and that is what we must achieve someday. Actually, when we uh, achieve such target, we will not have this kind of a choice anymore between good and evil, right? Because we will choose always the good. And what are the origin of good and evil? Because if you see the world, our world, for example, our current world, we see conflict, we see polarization of ideas, we see violence, we see war, and well, this is something that we can see in our world. But where evil came from? Then, but we also say that God created the universe. Well, if the God created the universe, the world, and such a world has evil, well, did God create evil then? That's the question, right? So then Kardec says, right, the evil we see cannot have its origin in God, right? Because God is infinitely wise, just, and good, he says. And therefore, God cannot produce anything evil, right? Anything unwise or unjust. But evil is not an attribute of a special being either, Kardec says, because if it was an attribute of a special being, then we would have a special being that would be either equal to God or it would be inferior to God. If it was equal, then God would not be the let's say the one who reigns over the universe, right? There would be another entity in the universe, and in such case, um, the unity revealed in the order of the universe would be irreconcilable with such an idea. But by the other hand, if such a being that has evil as an attribute was inferior to God, then it would mean that God have created such a being, and then in that case, God would create someone who was directly connected to evil, which also doesn't make sense, right? It would be the negation of the God's infinite goodness, like Kardec says here. So then, where evil come from, right? So the question remains. And well, evil, according to Kardec's study, form two categories: those that humans can avoid, and those that are outside their will. So, for example, uh, between those among those that are outside our will are the natural calamities, for example. Well, let's think about earthquakes, and for example, the pandemic that we just have. And so these kind of calamities we cannot avoid, we humans cannot avoid. But what the spirits say is that for that purpose, we receive our intelligence. And the intelligence that we have can help us to avoid or at least mitigate the effects of such calamities. Right? For example, regarding the pandemic, we developed the vaccine, right? So to protect ourselves from such a virus, right? So this is the result of our intelligence. So we can see that even regarding those evils that we cannot avoid, we can extract some good from that, right? Using our intelligence. But what the spiritists say is that though there are those evils that we can avoid, and those are much more than those that we cannot avoid, right? So, and that's what Kardec is going to discuss in the following slide here, right? So he says that the most numerous evils are those that we create for ourselves due to our own vices and passions. So it means that because we have vices and passions, and we have vices and passions because we are still imperfect beings, right? So that is something natural. We we study in the Spiritist book that God created us simple and ignorant, right? So and then we evolved through reincarnation until we reach perfection. So it's let's say normal that our present level as spirits we still have vices and passions which directly connected to our imperfection. We are imperfect beings because if we were conformed strictly to the divine laws, then it means that we wouldn't have vices and passions because to conform with the divine laws is to choose always the good, right? So, and in that case, in such case, we would avoid the most pungent ills, the Spiritists say here, right? So, if we do not do that, is because of our own free will, and so we must suffer the consequences. Because we are imperfect, we still don't know how to use well our free will. Right? So, and then sometimes, or most of the times, in some cases, we choose evil, and then by the law of cause and effect set by God, also we must suffer the consequences. Although we must be aware that the suffering that we have as a consequence of our bad choices doesn't mean to penalize us, right? But to correct our ways. So at the end of the day, we see that everything that happened to us, even our suffering, uh, is something that direct us to good, right? Because if we didn't suffer the consequences of our bad choices, we would not never correct ourselves, right? So that's the meaning here, right? So if we think that way, we see that the evil actually is something that is not real, right? Because everything that happens is to our good, right? So and what the spirits say is that even if we or make bad choices, choosing evil, a time is come, they say, when the excess of a moral evil becomes intolerable and make us change our course, right? So we can experiment that in our lives, right? Right? We are constantly changing our ways and looking for good, right? Looking to get away from suffering, from some sickness, and from all the bad things that could happen to us. And then that is our process of evolution, right? Um, so at the end of the day, as I said, and the spiritists say here, evil is the absence of the good, the same as cold is the absence of heat, or darkness is the absence of light, right? So it means that as cold is not something real, right? As darkness is not something real compared to light, or cold compared to heat, also evil is not something real compared to good, right? Because God is goodness, right? So He creates goodness. So evil is something that we may see in our present world, as I said in the beginning, but this is only temporary, right? Because as we evolve, evil is diminished more and more from our world. So we are, for example, presently we are going through what we call the planetary transition, right? From a world of expiation to a world of regeneration, right? So this is a evolution that we are going through, and we say that in the world of expiation, um, evil predominates. It's like our present world, right? In a world of regenerated world, evil does not predominate anymore, although good still do not predominate, right? Good will predominate only in what we call the happy world. But we are going through this process, right? We are going through this the present world that we are today to the regenerated world and then to the happy world. So this is the process of evolution, right? And so what the Spiritists explain is that evil by itself uh, is not real as good is, because it is only temporary, right? So that's why they say that where good does not exist, then you have evil, which is our case in our present world, right? But they also say that in not practicing evil is already the beginning of good, because we live in this world where we see lots of evil, but we individually we can uh, we have our free will and we can decide about ourselves that, well, I won't practice evil anymore, right? So this is something that we can do now, right? So in spite of what is happening in the world, right? Because God desires only the good, the Spirit say, right? So that's why evil proceeds only from us. So in the end, right, what is the origin of evil? Well, the origin of evil is in ourselves, right? In, when we still don't know how to use well our free will. And then Kardec asked, right? But if evil results from the imperfection of the humans, well, did God create the cause of evil? So indirectly, that means that if God created us that can, by our imperfection, created evil, let's say, then indirectly God created the evil, right? Then why? Then this following question is why did God did not create us perfect? Because in that case we would not make any bad choice, right? We would not choose evil. And then what the Spiritist answer to Kardec is that if we were created perfect, um, we would always choose good, right? And but then, if we were created that way, we wouldn't have any free will in that case, right? And we would have any merit of that good that we were choosing. So that's why good willed us to be subject to the law of progress, right? And for such progress must be the fruit of our own effort. So that's why he gave us free will, right? Because through free will we choose good or bad, good or evil, and then we bear the responsibility for the evil that we commit, and the benefit for by the other hand, the benefit for the good that we produce, right, as a result of our free will. So in that case, it means that if we today still cannot choose very well, and sometimes or many times we choose evil, as we are evolving as spirits, we will choose evil less and less, and good more and more. So, and that will be we will have merit on it, because it will be the result of our free will is something that we choose by ourselves, right? So that's the reason why God did not create us perfect, right? So, and that's the explanation regarding the origin of good and evil. Uh, and then what Kardec studied in this slide here, that he says that by studying all the passions and vices, we can see that our passions and vices have their origin in the self-preservation instinct. So we can see here that passions, which in our current level is not something good, because passions is related to a person who is selfish, for example, right? So at our present level as a spirit, it's not a good thing, but it was a good thing in the past, because the self-preservation instinct is a good thing, right? So this is directly connected to the law of conservation, which is there on the third part of the Spiritist book. So, what Kardec explains here is that in the first phases of our corporeal existence, we have only material needs to satisfy, right? So, thinking about when we were living in the caves, right? At the time when we were living in the caves, at that time, we didn't have a philosophy, we didn't have a science, right? We didn't have even religion developed as we have today. We just were worried about, well, how I will survive, right, today? Where I can find food, right, to preserve myself. So, and at that stage, passions are a need, Kardec says, because passions is something that help us to look for what we need, right? If we didn't have this such a passion, we would suffer the lack of food, for example, and we would stay there, no? Dying by starvation, right? So passion incite us to look for something more, right? For food, for better situation or for our life, right? So, but after that period, Kardec says, other needs arise, right? First, semi-moral and semi-material needs, right? Next, exclusively moral. And at that new stage, then passions become evil, become a bad thing, right? So that's what Kardec is explaining here, right? So passion is good or bad depending on the stage on the stage of our development that we are looking at, right? So that's very interesting here that he's saying. And well, then what was one he says what was once is something good when we were directly worried about our preservation, today when we are achieving a moral stage, become evil, right? So uh, however, he points out here that even today, passion is not something bad, right? So, because, for example, ambition, right? Ambition is a kind of a passion. Ambition, at some degree, is a good thing, right? Uh, a person who wants to get a better situation in his life, let's say materially or intellectually or anyway spiritually, well, that's a good thing, right? Because if he didn't have that ambition, he would stay idle, right? So what is bad today for us is the abuse of a passion, right? So that constitutes evil in our even in our current situation. And we humans, Kardec says, we abuse things by virtue of our free will, right? So this abuse of passions is a consequence of our choice, right? Our free will. And that's why we must suffer the consequences of the bad choices But at the end of the day, in order to learn to choose the good, right? So that is the situation here. And then going back to Spiritist book, we were here in the up until now until we were in the Genesis book, right? Now going back to the Spiritist book, let's see what Kardec tell us about good and evil there. So what he says there is that the circumstances also give good and evil a relative seriousness, right? Because let's say a person who knows something that is good and something that is evil, and knowing or the two sides, he chooses evil. So he is more responsible in such cases, right? So, and then suppose another person who make a choice, but he doesn't know very well what is the good side and the evil side, right? So he chooses something in the darkness, let's say. In that case, he has less responsibility for that choice. So that's why good and evil have a relative seriousness, as Kardec is explaining here, right? So. Um, but evil is no less evil by being necessary. Right? That's another analysis that Kardec does here, right? Because uh, in certain cases of destruction of things or of our fellow beings, thinking about the war, for example, right? So if our country is attacked by a foreign country, well, we must defend our country, right? So we are, as soldier, we are going to defend our country, and by defend our country, we will be in war of that country, and probably we will kill people, right? And this is not less evil by being a necessity in this case, right? Because if I do not defend my country, then the foreign country will come and destroy my family, my all the things I have. So in that case, I must defend, right? So it would be something just to defend, and but it's not less evil by being necessary. So it means that you can go fight in a battle, defend your country, but you cannot abuse of that, right? Because we see situations in every war when some people uh, make use of a cruelty, for example. So that's not something that should be done, right? So that's what Kardec explained here. And another circumstance that Kardec mentioned here is that the responsibility for evil does not fall only on the one who executed the evil, right? Who, who did the evil, but the one who has caused it, right? Because I can, uh, I can, I cannot do an evil, but I can incite a person to do that, right? In that case, I'm also responsible for that. And another analysis that Kardec makes here is that sometimes we do not do evil by ourselves, but we take advantage of it, right? Of some evil done, and in that case, we are culpable to the same degree, right? So that is the situation here. And well, Kardec asked the spirit, right? Is the desire for evil as reprehensible as evil itself? So you see here, one thing is I committing an evil. Another thing I do not commit, but I desire it, right? So, and if we think that we are imperfect beings, I would say that it is natural that we have desire for evil in some cases, right? For example, desiring something that is not ours, right? So uh, it is, let's say, natural, between commas, and but In such case, what the Spiritists say is that if I have a desire for evil, but I resist it to such a desire, that would be something virtual, right? So it would be a virtue, right? So because in that case, for example, if I desire, I have a desire, and I have the possibility of doing it, but I resist for doing it, that is a virtue, right? However, there is some cases that I have a desire of evil for evil, and I do not commit it because I don't have the opportunity for doing it, right? So in that case, that's not the person is culpable anyway, right? So that's the situation where Jesus teaches us in the gospel, right? So uh, you don't have to make adultery, right? To have sin in what he say. Uh, uh, it's enough to think, right, about the adultery, and then we also have committed a sin. So that's the situation here, right? We don't commit the sin because the evil, because we don't have the opportunity. But if we had it, we would do it, right? So and another thing is that we are talking a lot about evil here, but another important thing, because we can say, well, so if I do not do make any evil, and then everything is okay for me, you know? We would think that way, but what the spirits say, no, it's not enough to not to do what is evil, right? Because we must do, besides not doing evil, we must do all the good we can, right? So that's what is something that would please God, you know? Because we will answer not only for the evil that we do to someone, but we also will respond for the evil that resulted from a good that we did not do, right? So that's is an interesting situation here, because evil that has resulted from the good that we left undone, that would be something we would be culpable for that also, right? So uh, it means that we must be good in any case, in any time, right? So everywhere. Um, and then Kardec asked if there are someone who cannot do good, right? So is there someone who cannot do good because, for example, the people doesn't have material possessions, so then he cannot do make charity for charitable actions, for example, right? So, and in that case, such person would not be allowed to do good, right? So then the spiritist answers Kardec, well, no one is in a situation where he cannot do good, right? Only selfish persons never find an opportunity for doing so, because doing good is not only helping people with material things, right? So, but if you listen to someone who is suffering, if you give a good a good advice to someone which has a problem, if you pray for someone who is sick, so in all these cases you are doing good, and it doesn't involve any material thing, right? So that's why the spiritists say to Kardec that doing good is actually is a state of a mind, right? It's a mindset. Is the mindset where I'm not worried about only about myself, but I'm worried about my fellow beings, right? So, in that case, if I have this mindset, we will do good, right? So, that's why the Spirit say here, right? Doing good does not only mean being charitable, but also being useful as possible whenever our help is needed, as in the example that I gave you, right? So for individuals immersed in an atmosphere of vice, evil become a draw, but never an irresistible one. This is a comment here because Kardec asked the spirits, right? Well, but there are individuals who has born in a atmosphere of vice, an environment of a vice, right? So, and in such case, uh, this person probably will have such a vice. Well, in that case, would he or she be culpable for that? And the answer is this atmosphere of vice become a draw, of course, because we live in that environment, right? But it's not an irresistible one, right? So the draw. So, and then we have on our free will to choose. They even say, the spiritists, that there are persons who choose, before being born. They choose, whereas they are in the spiritual world before being born. They choose to be born, and being born on an atmosphere of vice, to let's say, to fight himself with this tendency, right, to vice. So there is cases such as this, right? And the merit of the good done also lies in its difficulty. A good that is very easy for us to do, to make, or to make, is not something so meritory, right? But something that is very difficult to realize or to accomplish, that would be have much merit, right? And then Kardec, the Spiritists, remember us about the parable of the widow's mite, right? She went there to the temple and put there the only two coins that she had, right? For even for her survival, and then she put it there. So that's something very difficult for her, because she was taking for her own needs to put that coins there, right? So this is very meritorious. That called the attention of Jesus, right? Then, um, going to our conclusion, we have a philosopher called Leibniz, Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz. He was a German philosopher who lived in the 17th century to 18th century, and he wrote a book about called Theodicy Essays, and this theodicy means a kind of a study where we or the thinkers try to explain why evil exists in the world, and of course they also try to explain why God is not the creator of evil, right? Like we saw in the beginning of this presentation. So that's what Leibniz was studying when he was writing this book. And then he classified evils in three types, right? So he say we can consider evil in a metaphysical, moral, and physical way. What is the metaphysical evil? Metaphysical evil consists of a simple imperfection, right? Like I said in the beginning, we still are imperfect beings, and it is natural because God created us simple and ignorant. We are going through perfection, but we are still not even in the middle of this path, right? We are still close to the beginning, so we are imperfect beings. And then, metaphysically speaking, uh, for being perfect, for being still being perfect, we make evil, right? So that's what Leibniz is explaining here. And by being imperfect, we apply our goodwill not very well, right? So then we choose evil. And then by choosing evil, we incur in moral evil. So the second kind of evil here, right? So moral evil is we have a moral evil in consists in wrongdoing. He says, right? Or in other words, the bad choices that we make, applying our good will, our free will. And then, as a consequence of such moral evil that we still commit in our present stage of evolution, that is the physical evil, right? So let's say a sickness, loss of material things. Well, in that case, such physical evil is a consequence, right? Suffering is a consequence of our bad choices. So we can see here a kind of a series here, right? So because we are imperfect, metaphysical evil, we still make bad choices, and then we incur in moral evil, right? So, and as a consequence of our bad choices, we have the physical evil, right? Which is suffering. But again, right? So suffering is not something that God put on us in order to penalize us, but suffering is something that by going through such suffering, we can change our ways, right? We can change our choices. We can apply our good free will better, right? And then uh, applying our free will better means choosing good, and then we don't have moral evil, right? So, and if we don't have moral such situation for moral evil anymore, is because we became more perfect. So as we became more perfect, the metaphysical evil diminished, right? So that is the kind of a cycle, right? So but everything at the end of the day is for our good. So that's then we can see why we say that the God is infinitely just and good, right? So one of his attributes, because God wants us. And Leibniz says that, right? This philosopher, he was a Christian, right? So, but a Protestant, and then he says that God wants before all the good, and consequently the best, the good for everything, the good for all of us, right? So God does not want the moral and physical evil at all, right? So God allows physical evil, he says, as a correction of the wrongdoing, and also to prevent greater evils or obtain greater goods. This is something interesting here because, right? Because sometimes uh, an evil happening to us, and then we get sad about that, right? But then sometime in the future, we realize that that evil that happened to us make us avoid a choice or some actions that prevented us from a much greater evil. So in that case, that evil was something good, right? So, and also sometimes something evil happened to us in our life uh, in order for us to obtain greater goods in the future, right? So thinking about sickness, for example, right? We let's say we abuse it on some kind of a food, and then we get sick, right? And then, we thinking, and then we say, I must change my my choices, right? Choices of food. So I must take care of my, and then that sickness. The result of that was a greater good in the future, because by changing our habits, we get health, right? So that's what Leibniz is saying here, right? A simple example that I'm giving here. So then we have here now on the gospel according to Spiritism, we have the figure of a moral person, right? So a moral person is someone who is at least trying, right? Trying to always choose good. Doesn't mean that he doesn't make some choose evil sometimes, right? But he's choosing, he's trying, right? So that's why Kardec says here that the truly moral persons are those who practice the law of justice, love, and charity in its greatest purity. So this is the truly moral person, right? They are already choose only good, only justice, only love, right? But we still didn't reach that point, right? We must recognize, and we are, let's say, moral persons, not still not truly, right? Because we still make some bad choices, right? But we can even acting this way, we can be moral person by questioning our conscience about our actions, right? So that's why Kardec says here that moral persons uh, ask themselves, right? So we could ask themselves, like Saint Augustine, right? This which is written here, we have in the Spiritist book in the question 19, 919, where Saint Augustine, right, says the same, right? So he says there that when he was living there on the fourth century, when he was bishop there, a Christian bishop, they say that every time, every day, at the end of the day, he would make a analysis, right, of his conscience, and that is what is written here by Kardec, right? So the moral person asks himself if he has violated the law of justice, love, and charity, if he has done any evil, right? So if he has done all the good he could, right? So if he have disregarded any opportunity to be useful, if anyone might have a complaint about him, right? And also if he has done unto others everything he would like to have done unto himself, right? So this is the moral person. Well, what is the moral person? How the moral person, a truly moral person, would answer to this question, right? We can say that for question three, if they have done all the good, if he has done all the good he could, or question six, right? So if he has done unto others everything he would like to have done unto himself, uh, a moral person would respond yes to these two questions, right? Three and six. And but then he would answer no to the other question, right? So have I violated the law of justice, love, and charity? No. Have I done an evil? No. So have I disregarded any opportunity to be useful? No. Have anyone might have a complaint about me? No. So in such case, answering a yes for question three and six and no for all the others, that would be a truly moral person. It's something that is a kind of a target for us, right? And actually, we still are not in this situation, but it is something that we are walking to that direction, right? So that's why this issue of good and evil that we saw today, and the understanding that they are the basis for morality, is important to us, right? Because they are, at the end of the day, they are simple concepts, simple notions, but as everything in Spiritism or from the Gospels, it's very simple to understand, but very difficult to practice, right? So let's just make an effort to practice what we have learned, right, from Kardec books here, right? So thank you to listen to me, and I'm open now for any question you may have.
Thank you, Roberto, for this amazing topic that you're sharing with us, the good and evil. And when we look at the topic, right, we think that we were just talking about good and evil, but there are many, many hidden messages or let's say, straight message in terms of choices, responsibility, free will, consequences, you name it, right? So there's a very rich, a lot of information for us to digest, and it truly invites us on reanalyze how we're practicing our free will. As Joanna de Angelis says on the book Happy Life, she
Mm.
reminds us if we're not practicing, that we ought to practice a little bit more and be a little bit more firm with our free will, right? And make better choices, you know. And I
Mm.
love this reminder that you brought it towards the end of what is the good examples of being a good person as we see in the Gospel according to Spiritism. Funny
Mm.
enough, Daniel and I were sharing a video about Leibniz and his duel, if we can say it that way, with Newton as well. But that was not in terms of philosophy; it was in terms of calculus as well. Who want to um, listen to the YouTube video that we came across, I'll send it over to you. But it's really interesting how they had a dispute about who came out with differential calculus. In any case,
Yeah.
I mean, something
Yeah.
that to me it feels like, whoa, why did I come across this? And now you're talking about this. Maybe we were connected somehow, or I was, I picked it up, in the ether there. But thank you again for this amazing moment and this reminder. I would like to share some of the questions, perhaps, or comment that we have here in house first. Uh, let me just change the. Give me 1 second here. Is this one here, Daniel? Yes, perfect. At least you can see those who'll be asking the question. And I will ask if anybody has a question or a comment, perhaps, that you would like to share. Anyone? Paula? I'll take the microphone to her, Roberto. 1 second.
Okay.
No, it's locked right there. It's complicated.
Take your time.
All right, thank you, first of all. All right. Oh my goodness, I'm on international family here. This is good enough, thank you.
Thank you.
First of all, thank you for the topic because it never grows old. And it seems to change as we grow with more awareness and knowledge. I was curious where you would put wrong thinking, because I know we make wrong actions. But at the point that we catch ourselves with the wrong thinking, is that a connection with the evil too?
The wrong thinking. Well, it's the issue of a desire that we went through, right? So when I also uh, did make a mention for what Jesus said regarding adultery, right? So it doesn't it doesn't need to commit adultery. Just thinking of it is already a sin in his words, right? So wrong thinking is the beginning of everything, right? So because we start thinking something, and then we from thinking through our will, or in this case our free will, then we are going to commit. But as we saw here, uh, ha- uh, have, having wrong thinking is not is something that I would say natural to us because we are still imperfect. So we had, for example, regarding this issue of adultery, for example, I mentioned here, we have a philosopher from the Middle Ages. I It's Peter Abelard, right? So what he said, he has a book, "Know Thyself," right, which is that quote from Socrates. And there he says the following. He says, well, designing designing something that I should not desire, for example, designing the woman of my neighbor, he say, right? So that would be something natural because we are corporeal beings, right? We are still have passions, we are still have these imperfections. But what is a sin in that in his language, right? We don't we don't say sin, right? We say a fault, let's say. Uh, what is the sin is to agree with that desire. So that's what Peter Abelard says. So what he's saying that because we are imperfect, we have the wrong thinking, as you mentioned. That's natural for us. But what is a fault is when we have a delight with such a desire, right? So that would be something that would be evil in this situation. And then we will come to something that I also mentioned here in the last slide, right? So is that situation that we've been born in a vice environment, an atmosphere of a vice, like Kardec says, but that atmosphere is not an irresistible one for us, right? So we also can have our free will and choose to get rid of that situation. So at the end of the day, I should say that heavy wrong thinking is not something that we would be, let's say, I should not have such a wrong thing. It's almost impossible for us who are still are imperfect, right? But what is important to us is to resist to such wrongdoing, right? So there is virtue, especially when the situation that the spirit is put there, especially when I have this desire for wrongdoing and I have the possibility for doing it, but I resist from it. So this is virtue. Right? So this is something meritorious. So I don't know if I answer your question, but that's what I can say, right, regarding your question.
Yeah, I follow that. I have another one.
Okay. She says she follows it, and she has another one, but we can get anyone else with any other questions, any other comment. As we were thinking here, thank you, Roberto, for reminding us of this that we're still vibrating in a position where we will think of negative things. We will come
Yeah.
across negative things, right? And it's in the idea of watching our thoughts in itself is already, let's say, a provision of the good, right? Or trying to become a better individual. So thank you, because it can be interpreted on the other way, that just because we're thinking something negative, that we're bad people. Well, we don't know any better, right? So we're still vibrating in this position. So this is a great reminder. And it puts us in a state of good alert.
Mhm.
Not that we're, gonna all be thinking negative ourselves, but at least to really, rethink about on how we vibrate. Thank you. Thanks for the question too, Paula. Anyone else before we go to the web and see what questions we have? Daniel, can you, and I'll come back to you, Paula. Thank you. Daniel, can you pose the first question? Question comes from Kirsten, and she asks, we know that we have evil or less evolved inclinations. How can we find peace amidst our own inner struggles and wanting to be better, but often fail?
Mm. Yeah, that's the situation of all of us, right? So I think is a little bit connected to what we just said. There is some danger that we must avoid, right? Because, for example, if I'm aware of these less evolved inclinations, I can have a guilty conscience, and such a guilty conscience is something that stuck us in a position where we can get out. So, and then it must it, it we suffer from that, and you can see that in psychoanalysis, for example, right? So and you can see all the guilt that we carry within ourselves because these less evolved inclination, like Kirsten says here, right? So um, what is the point here? The point here is that we feel guilty of this less evolved inclination because we have in ourselves that we must be perfect, but we aren't perfect, right? So it's like we say for example spiritism, right? Jesus is our model and guide. Now, that's true. Jesus is our God uh, is our guide, right? So and model. And the moral person that we just saw here is also a model for ourselves to reach, but we still didn't reach that. So if I think of myself that I should be perfect, then guilt comes, and that is a odd situation because I'm not perfect, right? So uh, what we must do is regarding this less evolved inclination or this tendency to evil that we have these inner struggles, like Kirsten says here, right? So, and we want to be better, but we often fail. And then we remind here of Paul, the apostle, right? So he himself said there on one of the letters, well, I want the good, but I'm not do good. I make evil, right? So he himself acknowledged of such a conflict that we have within ourselves. So it's not something. If Paul felt that, imagine ourselves, right? So we what the message I'm trying to give here is that this is part of our life today in our present stage of evolution. How what we would do? We must struggle, this inner struggle, this want to be better. We must try. We fail, try again, fail, try again. So this is what something that we must do, and until we can control such situation, right? It will take time. I don't know how much, right? It can be much more time, less time, but it's something that is part of our life. This is our life, you know? Struggling to be better, right? Struggling with our tendency to evil. So, but by the other hand, struggling to reach the goodness that we have in ourselves, because we also must remind that if we are corporeal beings, and then we have our instinct, we have our passions. By the other hand, we are spirits, and then we learn from the famous question 621 from the Spiritist book that God's law is in our conscience. It means that the notion of goodness, of justice, of love, of charity, of beauty is already within us. So as we evolve, we are going to make this, we will make this, let's say, using a language of Aristotle, the philosopher, this is something that is only a potency now will be active, right? We realize all that in ourselves. So that is that's our mission regarding ourselves, right? So we 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 will never we will have to try. That's what something that I would recommend. But we can also we can for example pray for the help of our good spirits, because every one of us we have our protector spirit, right? We say the guardian angel, as the Catholic says. We have every one of us has this spirit who help us, right? So we can pray for him, we can pray for Jesus, you can pray for God for help, and the good spirit will help us to overcome these problems that we have, right? So uh, we must look for everything to get a better situation.
Thank you, Roberto. Daniel, can we pose the next question, please? This is from Daniel. Can we consider an evil act when a person has no other option but kill to survive? Can you talk a little bit more about this? Is there any attenuation before God's law?
Mm. Yeah, well, the the answer here is like we saw, right? The Spirit says, evil is not evil, is not less evil, right? By being necessary. And when a person has no other option to but kill to survive, you have the example of the war, like I said, or when I go to defend my country from our for a foreign country that's invading my country, like what's happening in Ukraine. But you also have a situation where you end up killing someone to defend yourself, right? So let's say in the street, someone attacking you, and then you defend yourself and end up killing the person. In that situation, of course, there is an attenuation before God's law. It's not, let's say, it's not less evil because it was necessary. But of course, there is an attenuation in such case, right? Because by the law of conservation, by the law of self-preservation that we also saw today, we must defend our lives, right? Or the life. Imagine if you were was not me that was being attacked, but my family, for example. Well, I would do anything to defend my family, right? So, of course, in that case, there would be an attenuation before God's law. That's why you have that circumstance, right? That we saw a little bit today. There is something that attenuate, and there is something that aggravate, right? So we talk about that always in spiritism, right? So regarding something that wrong, we say that is the something that aggravates when I'm conscious, I'm aware of of that what I would do is something wrong, and I do it. So in that case, is an aggravate my fault, right? But if I didn't know, if I didn't what I was aware of that that evil that I would commit, that would be an attenuation. We talk about that regarding abortion, for example, right? So when a woman, or well, not just a woman, right, but also the father, they decided to abort, but they doesn't know that they are not aware of that in her womb there is still a life here, right? There is still a spirit there. There is another person there. If the person is not aware of that, that would be attenuation. But if the person knows that and decides to do that, that would be an aggravation, right? So, uh, well, uh, God's justice is always just, right? So, uh, God's justice recognize our intention, right? Or our knowledge of the things we decide to do.
Thank you, Roberto. I'm going to bring it back, Paula, to ask her second question.
Thank you. This is a very good and deep discussion that I will continue to have after we're over with myself and others. With the tree of knowledge, I mean, the origin of everything, defined as the consciousness of good and evil, that seems like it's a helpful skill to have. So I guess I'm back to the beginning of how this, so-called sin happened, and then relating it to the description of man's evolution. As you said in the beginning, in the cave, it was about survival. So, at what point did this consciousness of good and evil arise anyway, just in the evolutionary sense? I hope that's clear.
Mhm. Well, in the beginning, well, in the beginning we are more instinct than intelligence, right? So it means that our free will is very limited, very very limited. You can see that in the animal kingdom, right? So you can see in a lion action, for example, the lion, he has it has most of instinct in it, mm, than intelligence. But you can see that the lions also have intelligence. The way they catch the prey, uh, there is intelligence. The way they surround the prey and they attack the prey. But is a very limited intelligence, only for the self-preservation uh, um, um, goal, right? In such case. And that also was our case in the beginning, we humans. So we were more instinct than intelligence. But then, as we are evolving, then we have that situation that we saw here. From the material needs, we have the semi material needs, semi moral needs. Is when, for example, that man in the cave began to think about his fellow beings, right? So thinking about cooperation, thinking about protecting his family, right? His children. When he has the first notion of a God, for example, right, of a religion. So in that situation, um, the free will grow, and instinct will. We Kardec says that until now we still have instinct. Instinct is in us. We have intelligence, but also instinct, and more. They say he says that the instinct never errs, right? So never do wrong. Instinct is something exact, but it's very limited. It's not something that is reasoned, right? So intelligence is something that is reasoned. So I would say that as the intelligence in ourselves grows through our evolution, when we going out from the caves and we build the cities, we will build the civilizations, we will build the laws. Then we will have intelligence, and then free will grows uh, at the same time, right, with intelligence. So it's something that took him, let's say, thousands of years, right, uh, for us to get to the point we are now today. But um, you are right in the sense, if I understood what you mentioned, you are right in the sense that it's not that there in the paradise lost and Adam he take the fruit of the tree of knowledge and evil and good and evil, and then suddenly he now has a free will. No, free will is something that is growing through the evolution, right? Through many thousands or still, I don't know, centuries of years, right? So it's something that is regarding our evolution as a spirits.
Thank you.
I would say that just to complement, is something interesting also when we say free will, right? We have a free will. Free will means I can choose good as I can choose evil. Then think about Jesus. You think that Jesus, when he's going to take an action, he will reason and say, well, should I choose this way, which is good, or this way that's evil? He doesn't have such kind of a choice, right? He always chooses good. So it means that even free will, in some way, in our future, we will, in some way, we will not have free will anymore in this sense, right? Of choosing between good and evil, because we will choose only good. And in that case, the philosophers, they say, well, Saint Augustine said that, right? And there in the fourth century, right, after Christ, he said right there, what is freedom? Freedom is when you apply free will well. And what does it mean applying free will well? Is choosing always good. So it means that today we have free will, but in the future, when we, let's say, we are getting the level of a pure spirit, we will free. We will have freedom, and which freedom is more than free will. Is the good application of a free will. Is this direction that we are going to?
Very well, thank you.
It will take time, but we will get there.
It's interesting the way you presented to us this ability. Um, what is free will now and what will be free will in the future? Because it allows us to grow with the idea as well, right? And I think that, well, I'm certain that the way you brought Christ as the example, I mean, he knows, for sure, on his level, what is not to do, but he doesn't dwell on that anymore. He just does, he acts under the will of our Father, right? So that's really beautiful
Yeah, yeah.
that you reminded us. Daniel, can we do perhaps two more? And then Alba has a really interesting question. I'm wondering if there is an experience, a spirit that made the right decision since the beginning, meaning following the law of God. In other words, someone that did not choose evil.
Wow, that would be a rare exception, right? Well,
That would be us. No, I'm just kidding.
no, 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 not none of us are for sure, right? Because if it was our case, we wouldn't be here in this world of expiation, right? So, but what is interesting is that it's something controversial. But Leo, Emmanuel, the Spiritist Manual, in the book Consoler, he says there that Jesus made this way here that always asking. He says that Jesus made the right decisions since the beginning. So he decided to follow the law of God since the beginning. He never chose evil, right? So it's controversial, right? Because what we know, and that's something interesting to say here, is that Jesus is our guiding model, and Jesus is a pure spirit. And we also know that we also will be pure spirit someday. So we also will reach the stage where Jesus is now, right? But then we also must understand that although Jesus, as you reminded now, Leo, that he is in line with God's will, there is still an infinite distance between him and God, right? Because that's something that we must have in mind. So I would like to talk about God and in another occasion here, because God is God, right? We are we, and we are. He is the creator. We are creatures. So we will never reach we will not never be God, right? So that's why we say in Spiritism that the law of progress in ourselves is infinite, right? Without no end. because if there was an end, then we would reach God and would be equal to God, and that is impossible. And that's applied to Jesus also, right? So that's something that that's why we see Jesus more as a elder brother, right? And wise, very wise elder brother, right? So, but anyway, Emmanuel says that Jesus went this path that Alba asked here. I don't know.
Thank you for bringing that, because I'm just going to make a plug in, or like we say in Portuguese, a propaganda. This Thursday we're studying the book um,
James,
Genesis,
right?
and,
Yeah. I saw.
we were talking about this. We were talking about this capability to be in sync, or to share thoughts with our Creator, right? And we went through the discussion of pantheism. We went through the discussion of different, what is not this capability, or what is in being not being to being in sync with God. Because the more we talk about it, the not the further it gets from us, but more philosophical it gets, and then it loses its meaning to a certain degree, because it's like, why are we debating about this, right? Just let's do good, right? That is
Yeah,
important to us.
yeah,
But I'm glad that you're saying this, because it reminds us of how much more we have to study to get near this reality, right? And what I would like to comment on your comment here, on your answer, is that what Emmanuel, and you say the Consoler, correct? The
yes,
book? Yes.
yes.
I think that he was referring while he was with us, doing his transition here with us, in terms of Christ doing the right things, always doing the right things. So I think that's what Emmanuel said. I mean, I could be wrong. I remember kind of glimpsing about that answer as well, which is in one of the books that I love. Unfortunately, I have to say it's not in English yet. Hopefully, next year. Then you say next
Oh,
year.
no?
It's an amazing, you know, questions and answers that it's so well put by Emmanuel, and the questions too. I think the group of people who came with these questions, there's a huge history behind as well, as I know, as many of us know. But again, it is definitely something that is good that you bring here, to be in this position of doing good all the time, right? And I think with the information that we have now, I dare to say that we have an opportunity now to, let's say, make better decisions, not always, but let's say a greater percentage of good than evil, right? So
Yeah.
thank you for your answer, and that's great, Daniel. I think we have time for one more. And then this is Leonardo, me. Why some of us wants to imitate others who accomplish a lot of good, or wants to accomplish great things, but does not pay attention to the small opportunities to do good.
Very interesting question. Yeah. No, the answer, you should pay attention to the small opportunities to do good. Because by doing small, then you can do greater good in the future, right? So, interesting question. We 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 cannot miss any opportunity to do good, right? It doesn't mean if it is small or big, and the opportunity to be good is always, and such opportunities are always in front of us, and we should um, do it, right?
It's interesting, because Daniel always says, and we always talk about this, if we can manage a small amount of money, chances are we'll be able to manage a large sum of money, right?
Yeah, right.
We probably learn, for sure, you will learn this through business school. And it's the same thing when we learn business school here, that you start with the small things, right? And then you start digging and learning and comprehending the greater things of life. So the reason I posed this question, is, as you said, we miss the boat all the time. The small things that is very attainable to us,
Yeah,
we forget, and we think we start prioritizing things that perhaps is not attainable to us. It's not reachable yet. And we look at Vivaldi, we look at Chico Xavier, we look at Mother Teresa, and all these individuals. Oh, how beautiful that is! But we forget the small things to get to the greater things, right? And
yeah,
I and one thing that I learned, I Daniel, what was her name from Minas Gerais? The lady who came here and spoke here.
Sueli Caldas.
No, it wasn't Sueli. The anyways, I forget something that.
Glória Coelho.
No, I forget her name now. She was a speaker also from Brazil, very knowledgeable, and she said something really interesting. Sometimes, we come with the opportunity of doing something small, very small, to reincarnate only for that little thing, and we still miss the boat, right? Sometimes it's to go ahead and make amends to a few people only, and we still miss the boat. It's just it's something that crossed my mind, and sometimes we think, why am I making this question? So I like to pose it because we're not alone, right? And I think it's for sure it is for me too, because if I felt the intuition to ask, I think it's definitely for us first, and I wanted to go ahead and share that with everyone. I don't think we have any. Yes, we're gonna stop from right here, and we want to thank you again. And Daniel was bringing all the thank yous from Rosalda, from Leda as well. Thanks for sharing this moment with us. Yes, we are inviting you already for perhaps to talk about God early. Find an hour, a little bit more for us to share other topics and other ideas. As Paula said, this is a really interesting topic because it really reminds us of making better choices. And it doesn't have to be in a apprehensive way, but just let's think about it. Let's make better choices. That's it. And I think that is a great restart, right? I like to joke around, and it's still February. Maybe we can implement this idea for 2023, right? And share this moment. So thank you again. If you would like to stay here with us, we will be praying. We will go through our moment of passes. At least if you want to share this, you're more than welcome to and bring some water too. And then we'll go ahead and close it up for our evening. And Daniel, for sure, we'll get back in contact with you. Okay.
Okay.
Thanks again. It was nice meeting you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all.